Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Orchestrator meeting. I'm still recovering a bit, so I'm not going to be, you're not going to hear too much from myself. But looking at the schedule, we have at least 2 topics. It is great. So, Rook Orchestrator is our first topic. Who wants to speak up? Come again.
Yes, this is me. Okay, just I have been taking a look at what is the current state. Okay, and what I think that we have in this moment basic functionality. Okay, and what maybe we have some details that should be discussed or to see if it is worth to implement that. Okay, because there are differences between how is managed in Rook and how is managed in the Rook Orchestrator and in the Rook Operator. For example, network management with monitors, okay. Example, the way that there are several things. I have put a link, okay, to the details, okay. So we can comment things more detailed, okay. But I wanted to know what is the position about a couple of things, okay? Mainly, one is the Iscsi implementation. With the Ceph EDM orchestrators, we have the possibility to deploy Iscsi gateways, okay? And to use the Iscsi gateways with the dashboard in a very easy way. But with in the Rook operator, we do not have Iscsi implemented. Okay, so Travis, I don't know. I have found a couple of issues, feature requests about this topic. Okay, so I don't know if it is worth to start with any kind of effort in order to implement this part in the Rook operator. So this is the first thing that I would like to discuss and to know what is the opinion of the people.
Yeah, there have definitely been discussions about adding Iscsi support to Rook, with CRDs, and yeah, it hasn't really started yet. So of course, before do the manager module for that integration, we need the CRDs to be implemented. I'm not sure I've seen a few people upstream asking about it. For example, it just hasn't been a big feature request, which is why I think it just hasn't had the priority, and nobody's worked on it yet. So maybe Seb, you have more view on that.
Yeah, I can add a bit more to that. So just like Travis said, not so much of a upstream traction so far. However, downstream has raised epics, which involved working with Windows nodes. Just to get some sort of standard integration, we wanted to go with the Iscsi approach. Initially, it was targeted for 4.10, but was made out of scope. It hasn't actually resurfaced. No, so it was in 4.9, but hasn't really resurfaced in 4.10. But at some point, we might have to implement it just to more or less like natively work with Windows nodes instead of requiring people to deploy with the native driver that we have. Although I have no idea of what the current state of the driver is. I know we have, I think, someone working on it right now. I think we have a contractor to work with the Windows driver. But yeah, I think we're just improving it anyways. So maybe next year, I guess, if the OCP Windows Node worker integration is there and ODF wants to integrate better with Windows nodes, then we might have to do it in Rook, deploying Iscsi targets and gateways, or just gateways, I guess. Which, I'm not really looking forward to, honestly, because At least a few years back, it was a bit painful to deploy that in containers. I'm not sure what the state of the art is today, but yeah, that's I guess where we are.
Yeah.
I missed that, Sage.
Still painful, I think, but it's been done.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. So my take on it would be to just make Rook decide on itself if you want to implement Iscsi or not, and if that means there is a difference between how the manager module is implemented between Ceph ADM and the Rook manager module, I think it's okay. I think we shouldn't force implementing a gateway just by the need of having 100% compatibility between those two orchestrator manager modules.
Yeah. I mean, I have a high level, maybe dumb question. Like, should this be something that the CSI driver is responsible for? Like, if the CSI driver, if you have I don't really know how the claim process works. If you have a Windows VM or whatever it is that needs to use Iscsi, but like, shouldn't this like be set up on demand if something needs to attach to it, and the CSI driver is like, oh, I need to attach to a Windows VM, and therefore I'm gonna start up an Iscsi gateway or something.
Yeah, but we still need to deploy the Ceph gateways for this to work. And that's what Rook will be doing. But yes, you will also have a CSI driver that does Iscsi so that it can actually map to devices like targets. I'm not sure what the word is for Iscsi, but just mapping it. But we still need to get the Iscsi gateways deployed, the one from Ceph, so that the initiator can actually connect to it. And I guess we will just pass the initiator address to the driver, like the CSI driver somehow through source class or something. But it's like we're so far from having anything, honestly.
So you would like tell Rook to deploy Iscsi gateways, and then it would do that, and it would also deploy the CSI or configure the CSI so that it knows about that gateway and can do the attack.
Yeah, something like this. I don't think we will be deploying the CSI one because it's already a generic driver. And I don't think we want to really embed all the CSI drivers, but still we will just deploy the gateways and then expose via services, I guess, and then somehow pass that config down to the CSI driver so that it knows where the gateways are and then map the devices and reach out to the Ceph and pass the credentials as well to things like that. But then we still need some kind of a hook as well to use the Iscsi CLI as well to create the volumes, like the RBD images as well. So yeah, there is work to do for sure.
Yeah, more general question about the manager module for Rook too. So what, Juan Miguel, when you say, where did we lose Juan Miguel? I think maybe his connection dropped him. All right, well, maybe somebody else knows. When we say basic functionality is almost there, does that mean feature parity with the Ceph ADM module, or what exactly does basic functionality mean? That we can use it from the dashboard to configure Rook to create OSDs. I mean, that's a bigger, or probably not there yet, but yeah, what is?
A lot of it's there. Yeah, like you can deploy the RTW stuff via the Orchestrator API in the dashboard. Although we haven't actually tested the dashboard part, but the Orchestrator CLI works, NFS works, RBD Mirror works, OSD, like a subset of the OSD stuff works. Like we can support some driver groups that use whole devices, but not the ones that have partial DB stuff. That isn't possible until we have a smarter local storage operator. But much of it works.
Got it. Great.
So like, What else is missing?
Yeah, and I guess the next question also would be, when, so right now the module is disabled in Rook deployments. So it'd be good to define, well, in what scenarios should we enable it by default, perhaps, or
Dashboard.
maybe
As
still
soon
not
as
by
you
default.
enable the dashboard, you should also enable the Rook Manager module.
True. Okay. So if you enable the dashboard, enable the Rook module.
Yeah. I think, at least in my experience, it makes little sense to use the Orch CLI in a pure Kubernetes environment because it feels a bit non-Kubernetes-like. But as soon as you use a dashboard, you definitely want to enable the Rook Manager module.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already fun to use. I mean, just calling Ceph Orch apply bitname mirror, and then the CR is automatically pushed into Kubernetes, and Rook does the rest. It's definitely fun to use. The question is, do we want to recommend the Rook user community to switch over into the using the Rook Manager module or not? I think it's up to you.
Right. And I think, like you said, the more the people adopt the dashboard as the way to do things in, even from Rook and with the Rook module, that's where it will totally make sense to simplify the management. So they don't have to use the manifest directly all the time.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost my power connection. Okay, electric power in the building. Okay, just to comment one thing. I don't know, but have you commented also about the monitoring stack?
But yet,
Okay.
what up with the monitoring stack? You're working on it, right, Juan Miguel?
Yeah. Yes. I have something that, well, but it's a manual deployment, okay, using the Ceph Grafana image, okay, that includes the Grafana dashboards. But I think that maybe we can include, well, in the same way that in the Ceph EDM Orchestrator, we have the possibility to deploy, by default, it is deployed, the monitoring stack automatically in order to configure the dashboard and to prepare everything in order to be ready to work. To do the same in the Rook operator. I don't know. What is your opinion, Travis, Sebastian, about this point?
I'm not sure I followed. Can you ask that one more time?
It's just if it is worth to include the automatic deployment and configuration of the monitoring stack in the Rook operator. This, in order to do that, we will need to add several components to the Rook operator. One of these is Prometheus, the Prometheus alert manager, the node exporter. We have to enable the Prometheus node exporter module in Ceph manager, okay, and we need to deploy also Grafana.
Right. So because of the extra steps to deploy monitoring, you're asking, could we do that automatically with Rook? For example, whenever the dashboard is also deployed. So I think some parts of that we could do more. Well, and also in this cluster CR right now, we have the setting which says enable monitoring true or false. And if that's the case, we do create, I forget which resources.
Service monitors. for Prometheus.
Just Prometheus.
Yeah. So the Explorer is enabled and we create service monitors too. But we just don't deploy the server side of it. We just assume that Prometheus is already running, so is Grafana and all the monitoring stack.
Yeah. I
There
mean,
are
Rook itself,
5 components.
yeah. I mean, Rook I don't see Rook ever deploying Prometheus or Grafana, right? That they're just external applications that we're not going to deploy. But all of the resources to integrate with those, I think it makes sense that Rook could deploy. But maybe we're already doing that.
But what are you saying? Just to provide, for example, the CRDs in order to deploy these components and to provide instructions in order to do the manual configuration, or to include the deployment of these components inside the operator. I mean, for example, to have in the same way that we have in the cluster CRD now a part for monitoring that is only affecting Prometheus. I think that it would be nice to have this section improved with more possibilities in order to deploy all the other components. Is that something that could be acceptable?
Or? I don't think so. I think so. You're asking for settings in the cluster CR that say deploy this version of Prometheus, or true or false deploy Prometheus, right? Which would make it easier for the end-to-end integration. But I think the Rook operator really only owns deploying everything that's needed for Ceph and all the resources related to Ceph, and deploying some third-party application basically isn't something that I think the operator should do. Does that make sense?
Okay. Well, I think that
some context that could be helpful is that Prometheus isn't just deployed for Ceph. Like a Kubernetes administrator could have Prometheus running for their entire Kubernetes cluster and want to link like Rook or Ceph rather into that. So there's not really like necessarily a Prometheus instance that is started just for the Ceph cluster. So it really is up to the user to decide whether they want to do that or whether they do want something for just their Ceph cluster.
Okay. The only thing is that if we do not include this possibility, part of the dashboard is not going, the Ceph dashboard is not going to work, okay? Because it is using Grafana and it is using the rest of elements of the monitoring stack. This is the only thing that we need to take into account. And I think that for me, it could be acceptable just to provide the CRDs and instructions in order to deploy the monitoring stack and make possible for the dashboard to have all the functionality. Okay. So
I think this is what we're saying as well. That Rook is not like a meta operator which just deploys operators and operators. It is just doing things for Ceph at this point. But typically, when we want to provide like a better experience to end users, then we link them to docs onto how to deploy something. So maybe the UI from the dashboard can display something. If the Rook operator is enabled, then when the user tries to look up like a page or something, then we could maybe display instructions on deploy something. But the problem is that, like also for Prometheus, for example, it is super popular in Kubernetes, but it's not necessarily deployed in Kubernetes. It can be outside of Kubernetes too. So it's a little bit strange even to maybe recommend to have it deployed as part of Kubernetes too. So we could just say, I mean, if you're looking at using it and getting a like full experience of the dashboard, then you need this, and that. But yeah, of course, we can write a little documentation on how to achieve it. But yeah, at the end, it's the user that has to decide. We can provide guidance for sure, but it will have to be like external links and external doc for it.
Even Grafana can be deployed externally to the Kubernetes.
Yeah, right.
cluster. So yeah, I understand. Okay, so for me it's clear. No doubts with that. And well, just to comment, I don't know, Tate, do you think that what is the order of priority or preferences in the things that we have now to do in the orchestrator part?
Yeah. You're talking about what's on that list? The things that are missing, you mean? For the Rook manager module, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sorry. Before I have one really quick dumb question on the monitoring part, and sorry if you already mentioned this, but does Rook do the configuration integration to like tell the dashboard how to talk to the Kubernetes Prometheus so you can do all the graphing stuff?
No. This need to be done manually, okay? Because we do not have the information about the monitoring resources.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that would be really nice if it could do that. But I guess there's a permissions issue because the Rook operator doesn't have access to the information about the monitoring stack elsewhere. Is that the concern?
Well, the problem is that the only component of the monitoring stack that is deployed, okay, in the Kubernetes cluster could, in this moment, we have documentation for deploying only Prometheus, and that's all, okay? So we do not have information on the deployment of, for example, the node exporter, the alert manager, and the Grafana instances is manual, okay? So the operator, the Rook operator does not have any implementation about to discover this kind of resources.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I really wish we could do something better there. That's kind of counterintuitive that you have like you have a more difficult process of getting all these things integrated when you're in Kubernetes, and you, in principle, should have all the tools at your disposal than when we're sort of setting up separately. But yeah. So I guess that would, if there's a way to address that, like that would probably be the first place I would start, because it's the thing that makes the dashboard really usable, is being able to get all that monitoring stuff. But after that, I think the main thing is the drive groups, the OSD deployment. I think that's sort of the key thing that you would need to make work better for bare metal deployments. And I guess complex drive groups, and also drive groups that consume storage classes. I think that's the other gap. And that means we have to introduce some sort of a new abstraction probably or something so that we can.
Okay, in the drive groups parts, I think that probably the most important is to have the possibility to use different kind of persistent volumes for the different parts of the OSDs. For the wall, for the different parts, the WSD parts.
I think that's really just blocked on this local storage operator project. All the total LVM and inventory, getting all that into some thing that we can consume more reasonably. That's the.
Okay.
But doing drive groups that consume storage classes is not blocked by that. It's sort of a separate track. And that's really just making the dashboard OSD view make sense and be useful in like AWS or a cloud environment. I think that's something that we could, some sort of like thinking has to be done about what we actually want to show in that case and what we want to allow. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have any thought about the design, or we can provide suggest to do?
I mean, I suspect that it'll boil down to a drive group that has a new property called storage class and like count or something like that. Like I suspect that's how it'll be expressed, but we have to have some way of providing an inventory of available storage classes through the Orchestrator interface, which Rook will implement, but Ceph ADM won't. There has to be some way of like collecting that. And then when somebody has to think about like what the dashboard should show and what the CLI should show, like how do you see that?
Okay, well, I think that this is the way. I think that to use, for example, labels, special labels for the storage classes that we can use in the drive groups could be useful, okay, in order to get a list of the storage classes that we can use, okay. And what are you saying is, I think that is the way to do, is to add a new attribute in the drive group in order to describe, to define what is the storage class that we need to use, and just try to create the OSD using these PVCs, based in the PVs using that storage classes. So I think that is what I have in mind also. So we can start with that. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Are we done with Rook for now?
Yeah, I guess we need to drop for Rook Huddle too, but
Okay, perfect.
something
Thank
else.
you.
All right.
See ya.
Bye. Okay. So we still have Ceph CI to ensure Rook isn't breaking.
I think we have that now with the Orchestrator Rook tests. It's pretty minimal right now. It's just doing like stuff for supply on stuff, and it's not actually verifying that anything comes up. But it's I think a little bit of time spent fleshing out those tests. I think the groundwork is there at least.
Did you manage to make the network reliable?
Yes, it turns out that Blaine helped identify that I was configuring Calico with the wrong pass-through mode or something. I was using VXLANs, which don't work properly on the lab for some reason, and so I switched to IP-IP encapsulation, and that works. So that part is resolved. And I have a pull request that turns Flannel back on. I'm not sure exactly, can't remember exactly why I stopped using Flannel, but in my testing at least, Flannel seems to work fine, so I think we should just turn it on. And if we hit problems again, then we can turn it back off and document this time why it's a problem. But yeah, I just need a +1 on that pull request here. Yeah, and then I guess there's still a backlog of pull requests that Joseph has put together that implement all these missing pieces. Actually, there is sort of a big to do here. Cleanup. Yeah. So when I went to go test the Orch apply RGW pull request, when you go and you're done and you try to delete the Ceph cluster CRD or CR to like tear down the cluster, Rook refuses because there's also another CR for the Ceph object store. And so it won't delete the cluster if there are like dependent service definitions. And so we have to decide how that, not quite sure how that should work. Like, should the Rook mythology task, like enumerate all those other CR types and delete them before deleting the cluster? Or should we require that the test delete them, like do a orchrm before it does before it finishes? I'm not quite
Can
sure.
we? I don't think that we should delete the cluster CR from the Rook manager module, right?
Yeah, no, it's the Rook. It's the Rook topology task that's deleting the cluster.
Yeah.
Trying to do the teardown, but it just Rook won't do it if there's other stuff, if there are other services running. So
Or does it
didn't-
does the teardown part? How many people are deleting clusters?
I mean, probably nobody. I mean, it's probably a good thing that Rook does that. It's just a question of how we want to structure the tests, right? So we
I
carefully
came
write
up
the
with
test, delete what they do.
yeah, I came up with a temporary solution that I pushed to like that PR branch, where it's just basically the reason that it doesn't delete the cluster CR is because there's like a finalizer on the cluster CR when you create it, like the Rook operator adds that finalizer, and you can, like, what I've done is just manually remove the finalizer. But normally, like, the Rook operator would do that if it detects that there's no like other dependents.
I see. Okay. Does that fully clean up? Does that mean that the CR gets deleted from Kubernetes? Or
I
does it
think
just allow the cluster to destroy without? I'm just wondering if that leaves a mess behind.
Yeah, I think it deletes everything. I can double check, but I'm fairly confident that it should clean up everything.
I think that we can have problems with finalizers of many CRDs, okay? So probably, I don't know, but I think that in this moment we have in tautology only one test for Rook, the Rook operator, okay? That is creating the cluster, is doing a lot of things, and is deleting the cluster. Is that true?
I mean, it's part of that, but yeah, the test is doing a bunch of random. I wonder if, I guess I would worry about deleting the finalizer as being too intrusive into like what Rook is trying to do. Like maybe we should just have a task that runs during shutdown that does an orch ls. And for any service types that we identify, like RGW, NFS, FS, MDS, whatever it is, it'll just do a Ceph orch delete. And so via the orchestrator, we delete everything before it tries to delete the cluster, because then it should clean up.
Yeah, that could also that probably makes more sense than the like weird remove the finalizer thing.
It would have the benefit of exercising the like cleanup paths or the deletion paths, the orchrm stuff.
Yeah. So would that be like a task, or would that be within like the Rook task?
It would within the Rook task, one of those functions in the like the post yield part, the finally part. You could do Ceph orch ls format JSON or whatever, and so you have and then just iterate over the JSON elements, and if the type is known, like if it's an MDS, if it's in some list of types that we identify, which I think is just RGW, RBD mirror, NFS, MDS, whatever it is, then I'll just do Ceph orch rm on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure if the like orc RM stuff is implemented.
Yeah. Oh, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Then it'll be a double win because we have to go fix that too. All right. You want to take a stab at that?
Yeah. I've been working on all the like orch apply stuff, and I didn't think of the removal part. So
all right.
Yeah.
Well, if we just maybe start with the RGW one, and again, we can just work our way through these Explorer tests and get them all, add in the tests and make sure they pass, and then merge them in.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
So the next topic I added Just curious what the current best practices are for running Link containers as a Ceph developer who's modifying the Ceph cluster itself and wants to be able to quickly iterate and redeploy and test.
Yeah, I've made it already to the to the other patch. We have two good solutions, I guess. One is vstart-ceph-adm. I guess that's the fastest one, right? Just recompile, and then do the vstart cluster, start the vstart cluster, and then you're done. I guess that's the fastest way to get a new cluster. If that's not supported by vstart, like if you have different daemon like other than monitor and manager, you have to use cstart. That's your cstart.
Okay.
Does
I'm
this
still actively using cstart? Does it still function well?
I never use it. I don't know who does. But there's also this new thing that will, because like the CStart thing, you basically have to compile locally and then do Cpatch, which is this kind of slowish process that updates your container image, and then you can use it. But is there a right? So there's the shared Ceph folder, I guess that's the one, because that lets you.
Yeah, but that only works for Python code.
I see. Okay. Okay.
So
So that works. You can manipulate the manager containers. That's really the only time that matters.
Okay.
Otherwise, the vstart one is fine.
Yeah. So the okay, that's helpful. Yeah, the reason I'm asking is that Redix was looking to try to get a faster test cycle for a real sort of setup, since he's running into some issues with Crimson that don't appear just with a plain regular vstart setup.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, doing the Cpatch thing is much faster. It's much faster than waiting for a full container image build and RPM build.
Yeah, and there are probably some changes needed to make that properly behave with Crimson. I would assume.
Sure.
Deepika used CStart and Cpatch. So you might want to ask her.
Okay. Yeah, I remember like a year and a half ago I was playing around with like CStart stuff and trying to make a version of Cpatch that like use a share folder instead, so that you wouldn't need to copy any data. But that was a little bit more cumbersome and it would take more work to get it working well with Ceph-adm and everything.
I mean, we already have the shared folder implemented in Ceph-adm, but it only works for Python. So we could also mount the binaries into the containers.
Mm-hmm.
That would just need an additional set of mount points. So that might actually be a good idea.
Are you mounting them? How does that work? Is it like literally mounting the Python directory from your source tree?
Yes.
I think the main gap here is that there's it sort of only works if your development environment is also CentOS 8. So we don't have sort of a documented way to use like a build container. So you can get on a different distro, but do your build inside an up-to-date container that has all the dependencies and build requirements.
Yeah, I've been thinking like longer term, we really want to have a easy way for Ceph developers to kind of build and test any containers, and that probably that includes like a local build environment that matches the container environment, so that you don't have to worry about what you're running it locally. And once that's working, we can even use that for like local totality testing too.
I think that the containers that David built to do the make test could work for build containers, but it just needs to be documented and tested. And probably just a script that like launches, because if you do Docker run with like all the right arguments or whatever, you can get your shell inside and then you can run Ninja.
Right.
Whatever, but having a script that does that so you don't have to think about it every time would be nice.
I mean, I wonder, I mean, it's not that different than like SSHing into a machine, like launching Docker run to run a shell in a container.
Yeah.
Is it worth like having a reference script that does everything for you, or just asking folks to go into the container and work from that point.
I think they have to know what the right arguments are for Docker run, and they have to like mount the right directory so that their home directory is still there, their build directory, whatever, and like I don't know. I think it'd be nice.
I guess could be a script. Say like enter container or something, right?
They're going to be like 10 arguments to Docker to make it like do all the right stuff.
Sure.
So it'd be nice.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Deepika and the dashboard folks have scripts like that they've used in the past. So
yeah,
it sounds like it's a more matter of like documenting and putting all these pieces together.
Yeah, like maybe like a C build shell or just C shell or just like something that just drops you into a shell, but lets you start running Ninja and do CMake and whatever else. Would be good. Yeah.
Okay. So we still have the ability for outreach. I think the deadline was I think the deadline is on Wednesday or so, and I already created an outreach project. Maybe we can change it and change the topic. But for now, I have added an SMBs feature for Ceph ADM to that outreach project. Anyone has a better idea for what you could do?
I think SMB is perfect. That's a perfect one.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we don't really depend on it right now, and it would be super awesome to have it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll be a good learning experience.
Yep.
All around. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have actually, this reminds me. This came up, I can't remember where, in chat or something, but like, would it be simpler to just have a Docker file in ceph.git?
So much.
One in the branch, one in the master branch, so you can just like type and then have you run whatever Docker build or whatever it is. Because the whole Ceph container project is like so convoluted and complicated. It's so hard to understand, and I don't think we need almost any of what it does.
No, we don't need anything. We just need to copy the generated Docker file and commit it into the Ceph tree, and then we are mostly done.
And then like add a README of what command you run to build the container, and like.
No, it's going to be a shell script because the command to run will be super huge, especially when it comes to getting the Ceph version into the container. It's a bit more than.
Yeah. Even better, yeah, script that you run.
Yeah, but that's it. Yeah. Nothing more is needed actually. The whole Ceph container repository is just completely redundant.
I think that would be a great project to get it into the tree, and then once that's there, then we can adjust the Jenkins jobs to use that instead of Ceph container. And then, yeah, that'd be great. And I don't know if we can, it's possible that we can just, I don't know if we need all the other flavors also, like the daemon-based one. We can just have the canonical one. And then Ceph container can live on as long as the Ansible crap has to, needs it. Right.
Yeah, we will still need the daemon container for Ceph Ansible. But I think for the daemon container, we can still leave the Ceph container repository ongoing. And just maintain it for the daemon container.
Yeah.
But that's only used for Ceph Ansible.
The other thing is that there are Jenkins jobs that exist somewhere that like rebuild all the containers if the dependent base images change. So those would probably have to be modified somehow as well, so that like at the CentOS base, when the CentOS base image changes on a daily basis, we go and rebuild stuff, right? So I guess all that needs to be updated accordingly.
Yep.
But I don't know if that's in Ceph container or if that's in some pilot Jenkins job somewhere.
I would think it's a Ceph build.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
At that point, we could also have like the dev target for the the make check containers that David made be part of this too.
Yeah. 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 So I guess we'd have like the base one. We could have a debug one that like piles in all the debug stuff, which probably we would never use unless we really needed to, but we wouldn't use very much. Yeah.
If we really want to, then we could even create a small Ceph-ADM cluster in MakeCheck.
Yeah. Wanted to go. Yeah. Do that.
Would this still be all dependent on like building RPMs and everything first? Since that's how the way the current
that is a good question.
process
Yes,
works.
we could skip that, and we would probably vastly speed up our container build process. But
that would also be a pretty complex project in its own right to make sure that we got everything we actually need and don't miss anything when we change the way files are distributed.
Yeah, it might not make much sense to do that because the packaging is like a good description of all the dependent software, so we'd probably still want to use that. But I think Dan actually wrote something that basically extracts all the build dependencies into a dummy package, and then uses that to install all the dependencies. So you can.
Well, that's what the install deps does.
That's for build dependencies, but sorry, for
right,
the runtime, the other dependencies, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the dev and RPM builders sort of figure that stuff out and figure out what runtime packages you need. Yeah, I don't know. I would put all that later. It feels like the first step is just to like avoid the complexity of container and get it into the tree.
Yeah, it's definitely a separate project.
And also change base image to CentOS 8 stream. I think we should do that sooner rather than later on master. Maybe on master we should just flip the switch and then see if anything breaks in QA. That seems like the first step.
That's super hard in Ceph container.
Yeah, I mean initially, yeah, we can just do that in Ceph container now. If somebody can decipher how to do that. Guess, Guillaume probably could handle that part.
Where is Dimitri? We need Dimitri back.
I know.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. See you next week.
All right. Yeah.
See ya.